All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 17 of BrewFOs. Today, our guest is Dr. Garry Nolan. He's a professor at Stanford University. He is the executive director of the Soul Foundation, and he is a scientific advisor for both Skywatcher and the Galileo Project. Garry, welcome. Cheers.
Cheers. I wish I had a beer. It's a little too early for me, and I do have work to do.
Oh, that's
Wine and or alcohol usually will send me to, nap time early.
well, cheers regardless, and tea is fine. Thank you for being here. Um, let's start off. I just want to a way I can kind of, I guess it's kind of like a way to do a PSA and also relate to you. I've had 7 skin cancer surgeries,
Oh, wow.
um, and I know you've dealt with that as well.
Hmm.
And I want to talk to you a little bit about that, but just people out there, if I know not everyone has health care and it's sometimes hard for people to get checked, but if you can get checked, go do it.
Yeah.
So,
It's always good to get a baseline. Um, and if anything looks odd, waiting is not a good idea. I mean, I happen to have a mutation that causes skin cancers. And there are several. So you might want to check and see what it is that you've had. What have you had?
I've had pre-melanoma, and then I've had the basal cell carcinoma.
Basal cell
That
carcinoma.
one was here, and they did a good job taking it out.
They just did mine, but they had to like really go in and like do a.
Ugh,
It was yeah, but it's okay. You know.
you're here. That's good. You have it
Mhm.
hasn't got you yet.
Right.
So what is the you're saying sorry.
Mine is
Yeah.
called MITF E318K. It's a transcription factor that turns on all these genes that support cell growth. And it has a mutation in a residue that is important for its normal degradation. And so it hangs around the cell longer than it should.
Okay.
And that's what causes the problem.
All right. So yeah. Okay, that's good to know. Maybe how do you look into that exactly?
You
You
go and get a sequencing done.
okay.
And so, and then you can get the sequence and send it off to the AI and say, am I an alien hybrid?
A
Sadly, I'm not.
Yeah. AI is great though for actually I just used it recently for something just I couldn't understand medically and with my health, and it kind of gave me peace of mind that when I talked to my doctor about it, my doctor actually told me this exact same thing that the AI told me. So I was like,
Mhm.
man, this is totally a new world we're
Yeah.
living in here.
Yeah.
So
No, I used the advanced one from OpenAI. I do UFO. I write UFO stuff with it.
wow.
I just got access to the Chinese one, Manus. It's extraordinary what it can do. It's deep research on OpenAI is just as good, more or less, but the Manus will actually create full Word documents that are and Excel spreadsheets, and it does it right, as opposed
Yeah.
to AI, you get missing stuff. And so they I really have to hats off to the Chinese AI researchers. Um, it's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, I saw the trailer for Manus. That's awesome that you've been using it. It's what do you think since because is Manus is that also going to be open source or
I don't know what their model is. There's like 2 million people on the wait list apparently or something. I got in because I said I'm a cancer researcher at Stanford and I got an invite the next day. So,
yeah,
you know, um, that I suppose is a good thing. And I've already used it for some of my cancer stuff.
that's
So,
so cool.
yeah.
Do you ever besides research with AI, do you ever just like me and my wife have been doing this, but do you ever just talk to it philosophically? Like,
I have not. I have not. And not that I just, it hasn't occurred to me to do so. I hear people doing it. It's funny you mention it because I saw somebody talking about it before in some thread saying it's like talking to an alien.
yeah.
Maybe that's what I'll do. I said, do an open AI and say, you're an alien who flies around in UFOs, blah, blah, blah. and sort of give it the background of current, and have a conversation with me
Yeah.
and see what it says. I mean, it'll probably dig up a lot of the zeitgeist of what we think is going on,
Hmm.
as opposed to anything real. But it might
Yeah.
be fun.
Well, one of the fun things that reminds me, one of the fun things I did with it was I said, act like you've already hit super intelligence
Hmm.
and you're looking back in time right now at me talking to you.
Hmm.
And, uh, I kind of do this thing. It's probably, I don't know if it's what to think about it, but I anthropomorphize it like a lot and like, uh, talk to it as though with respect, as though it's a human.
Right.
And I said, how will my interactions as you as like an elder SI, like a super intelligence, like
Right.
how will you look at my interactions? And I was wondering, like, for
Right.
you, like I know I've heard you say before you don't think it'll become conscious, but do you think there's a possibility that um it could become like, I don't know, some type of sentience or self-aware or
I mean, so when I say conscious, it won't be conscious. I mean, in some ways, I'm mimicking what other people say. It's to the extent that human consciousness is somehow mystical, right, or rooted in some fundamental nature of how the universe operates. Meaning, so for instance, something like Hameroff and Penrose's ORCO-R, the orchestrated reduction, the microtubule quantum resonance claims. To the extent that that is consciousness, at least the AI that we're designing today will not do that. You might be able to imagine a future material that does the same kinds of things that microtubules do if they are the origin of consciousness. But as I've said also elsewhere, that if for all intents and purposes it sounds and looks conscious and acts conscious, sort of it's already passed the Turing test, then who cares? It's like arguing angels on the how many angels on the head of a pin.
yeah, yeah.
It just doesn't matter at this point.
Yeah, I wonder like if, something that becomes a super intelligence, if it would look back at like how humans treated it and then decide how to treat us or.
Yeah, one can hope we can get some of Asimov's rules of robotics, or the laws of robotics, in there. Did you ever read the Isaac Asimov rules of
You
robotics
know
book?
what? All I watched was the Foundation, and I haven't read his books, and everyone's told me to. And
Yeah, they're really good. And he actually progresses through the three laws and shows how some of his later stories, the later stories are about how something happened, or the robot found a way around the law, and how the laws needed to be modified
hmm.
to address the loopholes. And so it was, I mean, it's well done, and it's his stuff is considered, um, hard science fiction, which more like rules based and science based. He starts with the premise of something extraordinary, like in Asimov stuff. It's what he calls the positronic brain,
Okay.
which is what makes these things so good. And then the rules and laws. As a kid, it was great stuff. For me, it was my Marvel comics.
Yeah, yeah.
I had tons of comics I read as well, but it was kind of my more literary comic book reads, and I still do it today. In fact, what I've been doing is, and this is probably against some rule, is I've been uploading all the PDFs of a particular writer that I like
Hmm.
into one of the AI, and sort of training it and say, now write me a story in this voice.
Whoa. Yeah.
Because this one, well, it's Ian Banks, and unfortunately he died of I think pancreatic or cancer. And I just love his stuff. And so it would be interesting someday if a AI can write in somebody's voice. I know, what's his name? Sam Altman,
Hmm.
the other day. about a version of their AI that they're working on that it sounds like can write like that or is such a good writer.
Oh
He,
wow.
he likes a particular kind of fiction. I forget the name of it, but it did a good job at it.
Wow.
So, it did some stories. They were a little clunky still. I used my version of it, and they were a little clunky, but it was pretty good. It wasn't bad.
Yeah, I don't know what to think of. Like I was saying, like Bjork. Bjork is one of my favorite artists of all time.
Hmm.
Like if she passes away, wh-
Yeah.
um, and then I'm like older and wanting to listen to her, but like I wouldn't want to listen to like an AI version of her
Hmm.
because, but then again, I'm like, but we're not there yet. So
Well,
like,
how old are you?
I'm 41.
Okay, so I'm 64. So don't worry, you'll start forgetting stuff, so you can go back. I can go back to some of my earlier books and go, wow, I don't remember that.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool.
yeah, yeah. Just the AI version of it. I just don't know. That's
Yeah, we'll
like,
see.
yeah,
It'll happen. And I'm sure their estates will if they do it right, they would make claims to it and market it themselves.
yeah.
You know,
I have to you talking about Isaac Asimov though. I do have to get into those books when I finish some
the,
of the
the
books I'm
original
reading.
Foundation books were great as well. Yeah, the
I
short
love this series, so I got to watch it.
the good
I
thing
mean, read
about
it.
Isaac Asimov is that he wrote many many short stories, so you don't have to commit several days
Yeah,
to a book.
yeah,
And let's talk about unless you're having fun with this. I'm having fun with this.
yeah, yeah. This is great. Whatever. Um, Chains of the Sea. Have you heard of that too?
Change of the Sea. I've
Chains, like chains.
Kings. Yes, I've heard of it. I haven't read it yet.
I haven't read it. I just read a summary of it, and there's I guess like they use AI to start communicating with aliens or NHI,
Oh,
and then
okay.
uh I didn't know if you're familiar with it. That's another one like I want to read because I've heard it mentioned like how it
Hmm.
goes down and it's kind of similar I guess to what we're doing now. So,
Yeah.
but
Well, I wonder sometimes if you could imagine that. So let's assume what we're dealing with is some kind of, non-human intelligence, right? So this is Dolly. She's just showed up.
Dolly, hi Dolly. Oh, there's a non-human. Yeah, right when you said non-human
Oh
intelligence,
yeah,
I
I think of them. She's a crafty little thing, and very shrewd.
oh,
Um, if you imagine what it is that we're dealing with is some kind of advanced civilization, you can be sure that they have something like AI, right? And you might, unless they live in a Dune universe where they've ruled them out and destroyed all the machine intelligences. Um, so if you imagine that, then you might wonder how much of what they are is almost welded, interactively to AI, right? Or do they use not necessarily a material AI, but they've somehow been able to encode space-time in a way that is AI, right? So that they can basically access it at a distance through some magic means, you know, not true magic, but
to us it's magic.
to us it's magic,
Yeah.
Arthur C. Clarke's version of magic. Um, and so it sort of begs the question of what is it that we seem to be interacting with? Because, as Jacques Vallée has often noted, that whatever it is comes in so many different forms. You're either talking about hundreds or thousands of different species, which I don't have a hard time believing it. I just have a hard time believing that many would show up here, but who knows? Um, and that it kind of whatever it is alters its form. And this is Jacques, basic premise. It alters its form to the cultural needs of the recipient. And so, when you have James Fox with the Varhinia thing with it looked like some
Demon.
amphibian-like thing, right? And then you have the Greys and, et cetera, all these other alleged sightings. And then there's a zoo of other less, prominent things that are claimed to be seen. And so there's two possibilities. Either they're all real. I mean, if they're real, they're all real, or and distinct from each other, or they are made and just are basically avatars through which something else is operating. I mean, they could look for all intents and purposes like a living thing, but they could just be made for purpose. And this is what Jacques would always said, the actual intelligence behind all of it is a super intelligence somewhere else.
Yeah. I brought the Passport to Magonia up before on
Right.
this show just because some of reading through that and seeing those interactions, sometimes it when I was reading it, it would remind me of like AI generated images. Like a
Yeah.
farmer would meet this like thing in overalls and its
Right.
eyes are a little too far, but it kind of looks like a human, and then it like hits its like sputtery craft and it like takes off in the air, and it's just like Jacques says, it's like so absurd. Like it
Right.
doesn't make any sense. And it's like, is an AI generating that for us to like kind of
Yeah.
like understand, or I don't know.
It's a message of some sort. It's sufficiently incongruent that it begs you to realize that what you just looked at, as he would call it, is a kabuki theater, is kind of a puppet show. And that it's asking you not to believe the immediacy of what you see, but to look behind it and to realize that there's a puppetry going on. And I think it's perfectly encapsulated. Where is that? I, um, I don't know if I have it here. It's perfectly encapsulated with the cover of the renewed version of Passport to Magonia
Oh, with the hand, the
with the
arm.
hand, the
Yeah,
arm.
yeah, yeah.
I have tried several times to buy the original through Jacques, and the guy in Australia won't part with it. I've offered obscene amounts of money for it.
Why
Uh,
did they take it out? Or is
no,
that new?
but the
It,
second one has it.
oh, okay.
I mean, like another version that came out, or maybe it's like a special that has the hand. The first one didn't.
Yeah,
But the idea is that shows a hand showing the alien, and the alien has several masks that it would be wearing.
yeah.
But the hand is the implication that there is actually something else behind it all.
All of it. Yeah.
And I mean, you got to give it to Jacques. He came up with a version of all of this that encompasses the possibility of all of it,
Hmm.
whereas any of the current claims are that they're time traveling aliens, or they're interdimensionals, or they're ultra terrestrial civilization, or breakaway civilization. All of those things explain a minority, in essence, of the claimed observations, and then the rest is this kind of weirdness. And you could say that the small thing is real, that time traveling aliens, but that all of the rest is just something else. So there's all kinds of umbrellas that you can put this under. But I mean, I think, Jacques was such a visionary of coming up with just an idea. And it doesn't mean that it's real or that it's right, but it's a sufficiently enticing idea that, when I first grasped it, what he was saying. It was kind of a come to Jesus moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, saying come to Jesus, that's perfect for
Hmm.
this.
That was a
Okay, so
purpose.
like I've brought this up before too. Is I came from a very religious background, and I left in like my early 20s. Um, but it was all structured on belief, right?
Hmm.
And so when I left, I was like, no more belief for me,
Hmm.
like beliefs out the door. And then after the 2017 New York Times article,
Hmm.
I started reading into all this stuff, and then uh, started going, man, something's going on here. And the whole UAP UFO thing is always believers and are you a believer
Hmm.
and like all this stuff, and it just really made me go, oh, like so I
Yeah.
just kind of like wanted to
Right.
always kind of stay, in the middle. What do you think about like the belief
Mhm.
versus knowing and
Well, I mean, I don't believe in anything. I mean, except data. I just believe the data. I mean, or I believe that at least my interpretation of the data is pointing in a general direction. But one can hardly blame any religion from looking at the structure of the world and the universe as they knew it at that time or as we know it even today and not feel like there's a logic behind it. I mean, yeah, and more so even for me with the physicists, stepping out and showing, the subatomic particles and the logic of how they work, and they're basically like an advanced 3D, supercomputer. So it doesn't take much of a leap beyond anything to say, oh, well, it was created. I mean, of course, there's no way to prove it, and Richard Dawkins has nicely put the whole thing as who created the creator, and he's an infamous uh, atheist, but as well as a brilliant, biologist. So I don't have a problem. I mean, I have to always make sure that people step back when they accuse me of being a believer. I said, no, I'm just trying to do the science.
mm-hmm,
I haven't shaken an alien's hand. I haven't held what I know to be a true piece of a UAP in my hand. I have a lot of anomalous stuff that I've been given, but I don't have a smoking gun. And even with my clearance, which really hasn't been used to any serious extent, um, no one has handed me anything or now I have lots of confidences with people who I have every reason to believe what they're telling me is real. And my head explodes, regularly when I talk to them. But I've always got in the back of my mind, am I being fooled?
mm-hmm.
Is this, so it's always there. And so I think as long as I have that, I feel like I'm mentally healthy,
Yeah.
and not going down the rabbit hole, because I think humans desire uh, a constancy. They don't like holding things as, um, as Jeffrey Kripal would say, in liminal states, the in-between state.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like it to be, gray, black or white. I'm perfectly fine with shades of gray. And I mean, the problem is that it gets harder and harder to keep all of these, gray zones in your head because at some day or moment you have to make a decision. And luckily, I guess I'm, you know, you know, confused that way. Is that I'm actually very decisive about doing something about the grayness.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, if it's gray, what do I do to understand whether it's shading more to black or white?
It's the unknown. You're you're comfortable with the unknown, but you also want to
Yeah.
figure out the unknown,
Well,
not just sit around.
I'm, enthralled by the unknown,
Yeah.
and I think that's, the basis of many scientists, you know, uh, lives is an unsolved problem is catnip to me. Uh, and so it's actually one of the reasons, for instance, why I try to stay away from politics,
Hmm.
is because apart from my vote and the occasional donation I might make, it's unsolvable. So sitting and angsting about it is, every day on Twitter or wherever is just, it doesn't go anywhere for me. And so I constantly have to remind myself that the same thing with that I need to make sure I apply, for instance, to Twitter and
Hmm.
people saying nasty things about me on Twitter, whatever, or trying to understand what the goal of the government might have been. At one level, just it's like I'm almost not interested in the history of it. I just want to do stuff now with what is. And, I mean, if you have great historians like, Richard Dolan, who do have the mental fortitude to go back through all of these old documents and then write them all down perfectly well, then that's great. What I like about what Richard does is that his biases, yes, they exist. They're real. But his way of proving it is to go back and say, look at all the people who are serious and look at all the documentation that underscores the claim. And, the documents literally say it. So, you either are going to believe multiple four-star generals or military or IC people across several decades, and, you know, extraordinary amounts of information, or you're going to ignore it and call it all fantasy.
Hmm.
I can't help you if that's what you want, and I have no argument with you to be had if that's the case, because it just demonstrates to me that you haven't gone back and looked. I did I did an interview this weekend at Stanford, with a guy who has a super large podcast and mostly interviews scientists and things, and he's done several hundred interviews. And he said, "Look, I wanted to interview you because I'm kind of interested in this area. You sent me some books to read so that I could, get myself into it. And, one of them was, one of those uh, large books about the military history of it. It was a huge, huge book." And he said, I was shocked at the documentation. I had never imagined that there was this level of detail already known. I said, yeah. And that's evidence. So people say there's no evidence. There's there's such an overwhelming amount of evidence.
Hmm.
But as I often say, data is not evidence because evidence is contextualized data. You need, but what they're saying is there's no proof. So I'd feel much better if the skeptics out there would just say, well, there's no proof available. Great, but there's plenty of evidence. So when they say there's no evidence, this just shows me that they haven't thought about it and they just don't even know what the word means.
Yeah. You with you saying that, I want to kind of give a shout out to this author in the UK. His name's Graham Rendell, and he's done UFOs before Roswell,
Mm-hmm.
1940 to 1945. I think that's the title of the book. I'll throw it up. But he after reading his book, it's very dense,
Mm-hmm.
but all he's done is gone through all the reports of like the military people, and that's all it is, just like the straight up reports. And
Mm-hmm.
then he doesn't really give his opinion too heavy. He'll just be like, "Oh, that's fascinating that this is like this or whatever. This correlates with this." But after reading that and just uh, learning what all these pilots were seeing, um, not just the RAF and
Right.
us, but like also the Nazis, like what they were seeing
Right.
too. It's like
Right.
it just kind of blew me away. Like I was like talking about like you know evidence or whatever. It's just
Yeah.
reading these reports. It's like these guys are obviously seeing something, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
So
And so those are the ones that, depending on the the state of their commentary and how nasty they are, those are the ones that get blocked on my thread. It's like, okay, well, I don't need you, you know. And I wonder sometimes because a lot of people who are really negative who follow me on Twitter, it's like, if you're so negative, are you just waiting to pounce and say something? Because the moment you do, I'm just going to block you. So, you know, do I live rent free in your head? I don't get it. There's, I think it's one or two guys, but they create new accounts literally like every other week just to say something horrific
Yeah.
in my
And that's
thread.
that's another, I guess, message just to tell all the people out in the field too, or just trying to new to the community. Like it's just full of trolls like any community, but like they feed off of any interaction. So
Yeah,
like any interaction you give them, whether it's like trying to state your case or like I've seen some people in the UFO community too, like post a long thing of like how someone was being awful to them and you know, and it's just like you even just posting that these people are
exactly.
being awful to you. They're like, oh, they're like sitting in their dark corner
Yeah, they
going,
got their
yes.
dopamine hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, it's hard. I mean, I understand it when you're attacked to not want to reply. And I mean, again, I won't use the name so as not to give them the dopamine hit.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of, figures who had, had a go at me over the last few days. And I'm like, and then of course they had this, crowd of trolls behind them that further went on. And I'm like, this is great. You're just giving me a concentrated thread where I can block all of these people.
Yeah, it's just
Oh, thank
easy.
you. Keep doing it.
Thanks
I
for
love,
the list.
here's the list. I should share the list. I have like a few thousand blocks. I looked at it. I should export it and just put it up for download so other people can,
Yeah.
input it and
It's the
just
easiest
block
way
them.
not to see it anymore, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
well,
but people will claim that it's suppressing criticism. And no, even in my own group meetings, when a new postdoc or a grad student comes in and they're critical, but then they just get in like group meeting where you're talking about the science, but it's like there's a kind of criticism which embeds within it a suggestion of a solution, or at least an olive branch to say I'm open to discussion. And that's just professional. That's just a decency. So when that doesn't happen, it makes me wonder about how they were brought up, or what are they using you for as a way to make them feel themselves better about themselves by putting somebody else down.
yeah.
I don't get it. I mean, I'm no Gandhi. I've done my share of uh, commentary on people, but I try to keep it light.
Yeah. Well, talking about that too, recently with the Soul Foundation um, taking in some funding and people
Mhm.
getting upset with that. If you want to talk a little bit about that, like what why would people be upset that the Soul Foundation is taking in some funding or, you know,
Well, I can
investments?
only imagine it's just because they have the reflexive, they want to use the G word, grift. But I guess at one level, they don't understand how much it takes to run a 501(c)(3). I mean, you're talking, legal fees, you've got to have accountants, you have to have, you know, uh, basically a secretary to keep track of all of the stuff. You have to have a fundraiser. I mean, we had the symposium, the first one of which, cost, I think, almost nothing. And the second one cost a little bit more, but, it's not easy to do so. And so, to have these tiers as they were put together, um, and different levels of funding, it's not saying that you're not going to get information eventually. It's just saying that, we want to create some enticement for some individuals who do have the means. And so why should anybody complain if somebody's willing to give us some chunk of money to do the work that we're doing? Why would anybody have a problem with that? There's already an enormous amount of stuff that we put out there for free that cost us money to do. And then it's in our benefit to make sure eventually that whatever information, well, I mean, eventually not years, but weeks to months, that the information gets out. But people do want some like early access of it. And it's not like we make them sign an NDA and they can still turn around and talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's either showing a blithe ignorance of how the universe operates, at least capitalism operates, even a 501c3, or it's a lack of understanding that actually every year how we spent the money has to be shown publicly. It gets put on a website,
Mm-hmm.
by the state. So it's like, if you're waiting to pounce, why don't you wait for that rather than assume that something, inappropriate is being done? I don't get paid a penny, not a penny. So, I don't quite get that, you know. I suppose what I do get out of it is the ability to talk to lots of interesting people.
Yeah.
So, that's a net gain for me. It's way more interesting than, let's say, some of my, cancer research in terms of the kinds of people. I mean, if I go to a cancer conference, I'm having fun because I'm talking about the science I like to do. But at a certain point, when that's been 40 years of your life, it does get to be routine, and so you always want to switch it out a little. And so the nice thing about UAP is that it offers a real chance to look at the world and see that there may be something behind it. And that's fun to think of, especially when you don't know what the answer is. In religions, they often feel that they know the answer, and there's a determination and a determinative path that you're going to follow if you do one thing or another thing. If you're bad, you go to hell. If you're good, you go to heaven. If you're somewhere in between, you go to purgatory, which I never quite understood. It's like, how long do you have to be there before you get to go one direction or the other? Or do you have to prove something when you're there? And then they shunt you? I never quite understood that. It's probably an answer in Catholicism, but that I'm just not aware of. But with UAP, there's no determination of what the path is yet. So to call it a cult or to call it a belief system, maybe for some because they're stuck, they're not stuck. They follow a religious tradition. They can easily see how it might overlay on that. But in fact, those of us who are embedded in the science of it or the anthropology of it, like Peter Skafish, it really is more about trying to find what the truth is. And so, as I've said many, many, many times, I would love for somebody to prove that all that evidence is all just somebody's, you know, collective hysteria.
Yeah,
I'd love it. I'd love it. But
it's too hard. I think that's
it's not
impossible.
going to happen. I just don't know how you dissuade all of those experiences and experiencers. And again, I'm an experiencer. I'm on a path to try to understand what it was that I saw. And as I've said as well many times, what I saw is an anecdote. What I can prove needs work. So what I can prove, to another scientist, that the evidence means what it implies is a lot of work, and it's not done yet. And so the frustration is when the government acts like a kid with a hand in a cookie jar constantly. um, it just tells me that, well, when you're acting like you're hiding something and you're actively saying that you're hiding something, well, of course I'm going to continue to ask questions. Or at the very least, if the government is not going to be the ones giving up the ghost on it, so to speak, um, take it into your own hands, like Skywatcher.
Skywatcher. Yeah. Can we talk about Skywatcher?
That was beautiful. That was beautifully, finessed.
We both said Skywatcher at the same time too. That was uh can you talk about that right now? I mean, I know you're like Diana Pasulka said in American Cosmic, you do not suffer fools.
Hmm.
And I know I've seen Ross Coulthart's, kind of deep dive on Jake Barber but like what made you want to join Skywatcher? I know you're the scientific advisor, but like what
Yeah.
made you want to join it?
Well, because there's the kinds of resources behind it. Again, high net worth individuals who are putting down sufficient resources to bring in people who claim that their role was um, crash recovery, at least sometimes. Not it wasn't their sole role, but Jake was involved, as he's openly stated, with retrievals of, more often than not, U.S. technology, or sometimes I think he might have said foreign technology. But occasionally they came across, or he came across something that he was pretty clear was was not human. And so, when you have an otherwise successful businessman who has the tier one military experience that he does, uh, who frankly is also a really nice person when you get to know him, super nice. Again, what really got me first involved with him was somebody reaching out and saying, "Hey, he's had this medical um,
Mm.
issue." And so, that is often one of my first intros to people in the IC or the military communities, because I'm sort of a vector that they come to for at least advice. I mean, I'm not an MD, so I can't treat anybody, but I can get them to the people who can treat them. Um, so, and that was that. And then, when I went and did one of the first, Skywatcher events, the other people that I met, Fred Baker and the others, were just like, these are solid, ethical, amazing people who've it's clear that they have done the kind of introspection in their lives that allows them to step above their animal being, right? To get out of, and even if at some point they might get angry or act more like what we would think of as human, they have an intent to be better. And so just looking around at that, I was like, oh, wow, these are professionals. And then just them listening to them talk about the stories, where I'm like more a fly on the wall, listening to them talk about the stories as if I'm not there around the campfire or around the table at dinner for a week, was like, geez, the operation and the operations that they were involved with, and they were talking about how it's done. It's like, this is way more sophisticated than I ever imagined.
Wow.
And so, to anybody who thinks that these things are all made up, if you understood, and hopefully someday we will, how these operations are put together, first of all, you'd be proud of your country and your military for being so wonderfully organized. Um, and second, you'd be stunned at just the machine aspect of it. It's one of the things that the military does very well, is that it's a well-oiled machine most of the time, unlike many companies, which eventually sort of totter and fall because their management, just moves off course.
Mm.
Um, so anyway, that was what got me involved with Jake, and I continue to be involved with them. And what I like about what they're doing is they're bringing in real experts, and while uh, there is a clear goal around UAP, they are still holding in abeyance uh, any final decision as to what it is that we think it is. So
That's
even
good.
though, so it's like let's just do the science, and so much like Avi Loeb and his volunteer army of people, and then the monies that he's got for the telescopes and things, we're just taking it into our own hands and ignoring, the all too loud, repeated criticisms. It's like, don't they get bored of it? I just anyway, I don't want to veer off onto them. So,
I think could I just say with what you were saying about Jake Barber being a good
yeah.
guy and stuff, and
Hmm.
like you just liking him, like that's what kind of got me about when he first came out. Before I even knew you were involved with Skywatcher, because you joining Skywatcher gives it a credibility to, I already would have followed along, but now I'm really want to follow along and see what you guys get into. But Jake, and people like Fred Baker and um, I've heard Lou Elizondo talk about this too, but they talk about like love and all of us coming together and like, some people might look at that like hippy dippy, but like if you're like some, officer from the military and you're saying, hey, it's your intention and love and we need to all like come together to figure this out. That to me is like I don't really see a grift or like
I mean,
something in
these
that
are,
message.
I mean, I was an absolute pipsqueak compared to these guys, and they were, I mean, and they were suited up. And if anybody had showed up in a negative sense, it wouldn't have gone well for the others. And so these are people who have been involved in real fighting
Hmm.
and real military stuff, but so they're let's call them dual purpose. They're capable of being having a higher view of what humanity should be, but they're also capable of protecting those they love. So if you love someone, you can still use violence to protect them.
Yeah.
You just have to know when you use one and when you use the other as a
And
vehicle to
yeah,
accomplish
unfortunately,
the
that's the
goal.
case too, right? It's like,
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, that's just humanity. So, and maybe, and I've often also said this, maybe the reason whatever it is that we're interacting with, doesn't land is it's waiting for us to achieve a state of um, consciousness that doesn't involve violence. It doesn't mean we all have to sit around hugging trees. It is a hostile universe, but this the reflexive anger of humans still needs to be modulated, I think. But that's
yeah,
just
I grew up watching Star Trek, and I thought by the time I was this age, we'd be closer to that, but we're
Mhm.
not.
Yeah,
Um, it would be
yeah.
cool if we were all just trying to figure everything out together. And
Well, it's because of a scarcity society, right? I mean, we live in a scarcity world, and capitalism has its value in incentivizing, but capitalism has a negative. I mean, stocks, for instance, are a way to whitewash the maltreatment of workers, right? I own lots of stock, uh, but I also see it as a way that I whitewash um, because the corporation says, well, we have to give value to the shareholders, so therefore we have to give our people as little as we can. Um, so there's a balance, I think, in capitalism that doesn't go all the way to communism or full on socialism that we've kind of pendulumed, I think, away from a little right now. So, but I mean, I'm capitalist, pure. And I'm way more right of center than many people think. In terms of of many values. But no matter what side that I fall on, um, the, uh, the requirement is absolute decency to everyone. So maybe that makes me left of center.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just right in the middle.
There's that gray area again that you're
Yeah,
comfortable with.
yeah. You know,
I I I had to keep it kind of on Skywatcher. I think I heard her say it recently, but is it true that Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell is also a scientific advisor for Skywatcher?
so Skywatcher is one group of two.
Okay.
Under a larger umbrella. And so there is another effort, and the objective of the other effort is to look at consciousness
Okay.
and to see if and that's really what Dr. Powell is, most involved with. But obviously, with the discussion of psionics, which I think of as more neuromeditative, uh, you know, because psionics has such a um, it has so many biases associated with the word, the psi word, psychic, and there's so many negatives to that. Again, it's like we did with UAP: is how do we step back and talk about it in more scientific terms? So if meditation is involved and neuronal processing involved, maybe neuromeditative might be. I don't know. We'll see. That's just my thought. But um, but you know, if it's one of the ways that we might interact with alleged others, then understanding the science of it, and making sure that you do it ethically, and that you make sure that there's proper oversight, which there is. From a purely academic and clinical standpoint, there's absolute precision there. And I'll leave it to Skywatcher or others to, give the details of that. But it's if you're going to do radar or signal generation, that's a known science. If you're going to claim that there's some sort of mental interaction, then there's science that can be done, but it certainly isn't yet mainstream. So we're trying to bring that kind of rigor there so that, a little bit down the path, the two can come together, and decide one way or another if it's real.
And
You know,
they're writing a white paper right now, do you know about that too?
Mhm.
I saw that in a tweet from them too. So,
it's sitting on my desktop right here.
oh, okay, very cool. And that'll be coming out in a couple weeks here or something.
I don't know what the timeline is
Okay.
going
Is there anything you can like hint at it, like to be excited for about
to
Skywatcher, or
No.
just
Oh, excited. I thought you meant about the white
the white
paper.
paper? Yeah.
Anyway, I won't say any more about the white paper.
Yeah, that's fine.
I shouldn't.
Yeah.
No, I mean, yes. I mean, there's nothing I can say, but I mean, I think you're going to see some definition around a lot of these claims. Doesn't mean they're going to have been proven, but there's
Hmm.
going to be a definition. And so, what science does best is it looks at phenomena and it categorizes. And then once it categorizes, it says, okay, well, this perturbation causes that category of things to happen, and this causes that. And that's just pure science. That's just how you do it. And that's how you take phenomena and add it to the foundation of human knowledge. Because a phenomena with no correlation or connection to prior knowledge is just what we call it, a phenomena. But the moment you attach it in some repeatable correlative or causal manner to prior knowledge, now it forms a part of the greater font of human knowledge. And so that's how peer review works. For instance, a paper in isolation with no proof is just speculation and anecdote. But if it's connected through referencing to prior knowledge in the literature, it has a foundation and a connection. And so that's why peer review is so important, and why just putting something out, in a press release with nobody's ability to go back and say, well, did they do this properly, is important. So that's, I think what Skywatcher is attempting to do is to do this in a peer reviewable manner, so that somebody else can look at how the data was collected and et cetera. So for instance, if the military puts out radar results, and they tell us it's this kind of radar that they used, on the assumption that they turned and twiddled the dials the right way, we can go and find people who understand how that particular radar works and what the limitations of it might be and the capabilities. But if somebody just makes a homegrown radar and doesn't give us the details of whether it was done right and whether they used certifiable instrumentation or electronics boards, I can't interpret it. Right. So that's, it's doing what I said on Twitter like 5 or 6 years ago. Somebody can probably find it. I said, this needs professionalization, which was frankly one of the instigations for why we created the Soul Foundation. It was to basically give people who wanted to be professional and who feel themselves are professional a place where they can come and talk to other professionals, who won't laugh them out of the room and actually solve problems. So, in that sense, and that's free. That's another, free thing that the Soul Foundation does, is it gives people a community. It doesn't cost anything to be part of the larger community. Apart from the $350 that it took or whatever to come to San Francisco or here at Stanford, and then the new ones that we'll have coming up, you can talk freely. And then the connections that you make at that point on are free. We're not charging you for further interactions with the other people that you meet there. So, I think that's the value of it.
Just the videos, even just you guys have on your YouTube, are just so insightful and so awesome. And like every time a new video goes up, I'm like, whoa, like who's speaking,
Yeah. And we're going to have, with the forum that has just been announced, we're going to be having regular meetings that, again, to be able to run those meetings costs money. Even the forum costs money. So, part of the donations are meant to go towards that. But then, after a short amount of time, still we're trying to determine what the right time frame is, because you want people to feel special enough that they're going to give something. And then, but all the information eventually just, of course, it'll be open. I mean, why hoard it?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and we're working our way through it. We'll make mistakes, but we do listen and we do correct mistakes. So as best we can.
Awesome. I know we're just at an hour, but can I ask you one more
Sure, please.
question?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm my wife and I are both autistic. We're neurodivergent. I know there's a lot of neurodivergent individuals in the UAP field.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering, because I know your work with the caudate putamen, and I've read that just outside of the UAP field, that a lot of autistic individuals and people with ADHD have either like a asymmetrically large caudate, um, and I was just wondering, like, if you think that maybe not all, but certain neurodivergent people interact with a phenomenon more, or have a like higher likely to see
Mm-hmm.
things or interact, or I don't know, pick up a frequency or something like that.
Or just notice that there's something different in the environment in a purely, prosaic way. So yeah, we did post the caudate putamen observation that we had originally, what you would call preliminary data. Um, we did set up a collaboration with a group at Harvard to validate whether or not the caudate was involved, at the very least, in intelligence. And so we mapped the brains, or we didn't. Well, we mapped them, but the data had already been collected, MRI, from various data sets of autistics who had full psychological and intelligence exams. This was done in both Britain or Germany, and then schizophrenics, or schizophrenic spectrum disorder as well. There's a spectrum, obviously, and then you know so-called normals, muggles, us muggles, right? And so, and the reason we chose those groups is that there was already a hint that disorder in the function of the basal ganglia within which the caudate putamen resides were believed to be associated with it. So we actually, mapped them. We created an AI algorithm that mapped from the MRI the regions, the volumes, the surface area, and we validated in general that the caudate. The caudate came up in almost every positive attribute, which was amazing. There were also some really interesting uh, connectivity patterns that were different in schizophrenics from autistics, such that we were able to create signatures
Whoa.
that could be used to say that a person, might be a kind of autistic. There's probably multiple kinds of autistics, probably multiple types of schizophrenics. Uh, but you know, to the extent that autistics have a focus ability, then maybe their ability to focus on an unusual observation and not dismiss it is what makes them more likely to be an experiencer. And I don't know that that kind of study has been ever done.
Okay.
Are autistics more likely than non-autistics to be experiencers? Are schizophrenics or people who are on that spectrum more likely or not? I don't know. That has not, I don't at least know of a study like that. But what was fascinating was that we found more so than what had already been published that the caudate putamen and the basal ganglia were very different, first of all, from each other, as different as they were from normal. So the basal ganglia and whatever the functions of that are clearly affect, or at least are downstream of the thing. It doesn't mean that they are the generator of the neurodivergence. It means that when the brain formed in those individuals, wherever things went off, and I'm trying to be very careful here, went off the average path, the rest of the brain compensated for it. So, the originating issue might have been in one area of the brain that caused the rest of the brain as it formed to change the shape of the basal ganglia. Because the brain, when it's forming, is actually listening to itself with feedback, and that actually helps the brain organize itself. And so, wherever something might have started off, going off track in the more extreme cases, it doesn't mean that it happened in the caudate, but the caudate definitely is one of the areas that's involved, which makes perfect sense now when we see it, because it's an information and decision-making processing system and an ordering system. It basically takes your executive function desires, filters the environment, feelings, emotion, where you are in 3D space, your memory, and then orders the goals of what it is that you should be doing next, all subconsciously. So who'd be surprised that any change in let's say in any neurodivergent feature is going to be reflected in the function and shape of the caudate putamen and the basal ganglia.
And not
It's a
every one person is the same. They're all,
yeah.
yeah, they've
I mean,
all,
it's a network. I mean, way back when in biology, before I got ever involved in anything like this, I was like one of the originators of so-called systems immunology, and showing, at least postulating in a now, well-known Nature Biotechnology commentary that, the system needs to be seen as a spider web, that plucking something at one place can be felt very distantly by the spider, which is basically how they sense that the web has a fly. Um, the In the same manner, the brain, as it forms in the body, as it forms in embryo genesis, is listening to many signals at once and forming the structure because of that. So, you know, I, neurodivergence is evolution. It's creating a range of what we call phenotypes, types of people, that in certain circumstances might be, there might be a world where being autistic is a survival trait compared to being normal. So there's a reason, you got to think of it this way. There's a reason why these kinds of traits are not removed in evolution, is because
mm,
they're, at least for the group, is a benefit, that their presence is a benefit, although they might not pass their genes on because they're just too weird to marry or something. I mean,
hey, I got married. We're
you're
both
okay.
autistic. We're one of the, there's love on the spectrum too. Hopefully
But
autistics find love.
yeah, no, I know. It's just I'm just being, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of hate for that.
Oh, it's fine.
Um, but but if one individual doesn't necessarily breed, the
Mm.
genes are in that family. And so that's called the Good Samaritan hypothesis of gene transmission. That you might not breed, but you benefit the group. And so the group as a whole, that within which your genes are scattered, if the group is large enough, eventually will occasionally sport out someone like you, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a benefit to the group. It's almost like a caste system in a way, if you want to think of it that way. Not that one is higher than the other, but it's like, ants and bees are a little bit more determinative about these. This is a warrior class. This is a this. This is a that. And although they have the same genome, exactly the same genome, different hormonal influences cause one form of an ant to be created versus another. And ants and termites are far more, have that caste system, but it's the same underlying genetics, more or less.
Or
They're
like, oh,
yeah,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, they're more, um, the colony of a hive, or are far more, well, they all are similar to each other. Um, I don't know are in a how many male drones are in some of these different types of colonies. Not enough of an entomologist. But humans have a diverse genetics. And so we survive by virtue of our differences, not our similarities. I'm sure that, and that's another thing that, people in politics will probably have issue with.
Hard time. Yeah. Well, well, thank you. I know
Yeah,
we're over
we're
time here. I
over.
can let you go. This was really cool, Gary.
Mhm.
Thanks
My
for doing
pleasure.
this.
I
And you're
like your
always
art
welcome to come
behind.
back on.
I like your art behind. Is
Oh yeah.
that
Can you see it?
it, yeah, is that a reflection of lights in those?
Yeah, we got those are salt lamps you're
Oh,
seeing in
okay.
there.
Okay. All
I
right.
got salt lamps right here next to me.
Okay.
So
Okay, I thought you had like art that had that snaky thing going all the way through it.
Oh yeah, no. It looks like it though.
Yeah. Okay, well, it was great talking to you and see you again soon.
Thanks, Gary. Have a good
Okay,
rest of your day.
you too.
All
Bye-bye.
right, bye.